So welcome to DevOps for Defense. This is our April 2021 meetup, virtual meetup. And today we're going to talk about this topic. I called it Release the Cynefin. Um, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with this term and this concept, but it's something that I came across recently and it really sparked an interest. And I started digging deeper and deeper, reading more and watching conference presentations about it, like I do. And I thought it would be something really interesting. Although, whereas I thought it was somewhat new, I've discovered it's actually been around for quite a while. So you may have familiarity with it. But as I was working through it and learning about it, the implications of it to our work and our domain, I thought are really interesting. And I thought I thought it was a great way to set discussion around the systems of work and how we think about going through our work, which is really central in my mind to DevOps in general. So with that, let me just dive right in. I'll remind everyone of our code of conduct. This is obviously an unclassified forum, so no dirty words. We do ask everyone to treat each other with respect and professionalism. Don't talk about your private, sensitive, secret sauce stuff. Nobody wants to know about that. But please do feel free to engage and share your experiences or anything that you need or areas of improvement that you could use help with. Share your thoughts and please be free. Please learn from others. That's our whole goal here. And then as we go through it in a virtual session, I did add this one last bullet. If you would, if you're not actively participating, just hit the mute on the Zoom or on your headset or whatever. Because we do sometimes see weird things going on with the audio. So first, a public service announcement. It is the era of COVID, but COVID vaccines are available, and I see more and more people getting out there and getting vaccinated, at least where we are here in Alabama. Be aware that national defense engineers, generally who work in a closed area, are considered essential workers and can get a letter from their employer's HR department stating as much. If you have that letter, you can go on to various places like Walmart, for example, and you are a public safety employee with that letter and you can schedule your vaccination. We're seeing that at least in Alabama, it looks like by May 1st, vaccines should be available to anyone who wants one without the letter even. And we see pharmacies like Walmart, CVS, and Kroger opened up. These pharmacies, now obviously your local health department and all that is another option. What we see is the health department pharmacies are governed by the state, whereas the I'll call them retail pharmacies are getting their supply directly from the federal government and tend to have less challenges with availability. So I have also discovered that if you're willing to take a 45-minute drive, the availability of vaccinations is significantly better in more rural areas than in more densely populated areas like Huntsville. And then if you can't do that, be aware that there are pharmacies who are keeping what they call a waste list. This is where people have an appointment scheduled, but for whatever reason didn't make it or canceled. Because they basically thaw the vaccine out, they have to use it that day. And if they have extra doses, they'll keep a waste list and you can get a call, come in and get that taken care of. So just a quick PSA, this is something that me and my family have been really focused in on, and I wanted to share what we've learned, and hopefully you find that useful. In your area, of course, it is very geographically specific, but that's what we're seeing around here. And considering that at least what I read in the news, Alabama's kind of one of the worst in terms of distribution in the nation, hopefully your area is better. So what's that mean for us? This is kind of my special announcement for this month. I've been watching the numbers really closely and everything's going down around here. The vaccines are available. So I'm ready to go back to a real in-person meetup. My objective is for next month to do a hybrid. So if you are comfortable and would like to come back out to Rocket Republic to join us in person for the meetup, I'll invite you to do that. But I'm also going to keep the Zoom going. I'm going to try to I'll certainly keep the recordings going and all that. If you're not able to join, you can follow up on YouTube. But I'm excited about kind of getting back to normal-ish. So hopefully that's something that will go well. We'll obviously adjust as as situation demands, but we're gonna give it a shot and try to go back to something somewhat approaching normal. So to the topic at hand, I was reading Jonathan Smart's new book called Sooner, Safer, Happier. If you've Jonathan Smart's one of my favorite speakers. He does really great conference presentations. He came out of Barclays Bank, and he would introduce Barclays Bank as the bank that's older than paper money, which is an interesting idea. So he was kind of the agile digital transformation czar, for lack of a better term, there at Barclays, and had a lot of really great insight to share from that. He's now with Deloitte, helping helping their clients work through their own transformation. And I thought his book would be really good. It's centered around this idea of better, sooner, safer, happier, or better value, sooner, safer, happier. And this is his little depiction of that graphically. So far, I'll say I haven't completed the book. I'm only about 100 pages or so into it. It's very, I'll say it's dense with really interesting and I think valuable information. Um, it's not a hard read. It's good, and I'm going to add this to our recommended reading list once I get through it. But it's a list of anti-patterns and then patterns for addressing them for better value, sooner, safer, happier. And so one of the concepts that I came across in this book is the idea of the Cynefin. I don't know if you guys have seen this before. It was really the first time I had been exposed to it, and it got me thinking about, this is a neat way to work through how to reason about our work environments. And the more I thought about it and the more I researched it and the more I dug into it, I thought it'd be an interesting topic for us to talk about. It is not new. It turns out it's been around for at least a decade or more, but it's the first time I had come across it. So what is the Cynefin? It is a sense-making model, not a characterization model. What does that mean? It helps you reason about the situation that you are in, and you do that to really understand how to work within a given context. And so there's three core types of systems that are generally recognized in the literature: ordered, complex, and chaotic. The Cynefin takes ordered and it breaks it into two separate pieces: ordered and complicated, and ordered and clear. And the and I think there's a really neat way to think about how you work in each of these. So clear, it talks about sense, organize, and respond. That's kind of a very straightforward process. It's a place where you would apply best practice. Versus complicated, sense, analyze, and respond. This is non-intuitive. You have to observe carefully the environment around you. You have to actually put some expertise into how you work and analyze, but the application of rote best practices tends to be dangerous in this place because it's got too much nuance to it, as an example. And we're going to go through each of these. Let me ask: is anyone familiar with this sense making model called the Cynefin? Have you seen it before? I'll take that as a maybe. Awesome.
It's new to me.
It's new.
So I'm just going to walk through each of the areas because I found it interesting, and I have an error on this chart I'll correct before I publish it. But in the clear space, this is where cause and effect are clearly related. You can see the relationship. The outcomes are predictable and repeatable. there's not a lot of ambiguity about what you should do to achieve the desired outcome or effect in this space. And so this is where best practice rules, right? This is where there is a true right way to do something. And so because of that, you should absolutely apply that right way. And I say the best spot for bureaucracy. That's not what I mean. Um, I mean to say bureaucracy tends to evolve to enforce the best practice, but you don't want the negativity of bureaucracy in this space. You do need to avoid that. Gates and blah blah blah. It should really be more focused on learning and the application of that best practice. But unfortunately, especially in our domain, we often achieve that through bureaucracy. In this space, please avoid inventing complexity and applying it to the space. That just adds no value to anyone. And avoid believing that all failure is the result of a process problem. So because you understand that clear cause and effect, if there is a failure to occur, if you live in this space for a long time, not only do you tend to think that the failure is at the root of the process in place, but you also tend to believe that all places are in this clear space, and all places should utilize best practice when that is simply not true. So avoid the generalization that because you perhaps spend your time in this area of the model for the majority of the work performed, that's applicable to all work performed. That is not the case. The next area, staying in the ordered space, is complicated. And complicated is where cause and effect relationships absolutely exist, but they're not clear. It's not, it's not obvious, and it does require some expertise. It does require experience to understand and pull that out. Um, the work tends to have variability into it and tends to require a good, solid understanding of the situation, the signals, and the actions needed to create the right transformations or responses to those signals to achieve the desired outcomes. And so this is where a lot of the literature talks about you. There is no such thing as best practice here because there is no one size fits all that you can actually reliably apply. But you can apply good practice. There's a set of proven methodologies that if you monitor the right signals and apply the right solution, um, good patterns evolve and you can achieve good outcomes from those patterns. In this space, you have to be cautious of oversimplification. We already talked about the pitfalls of applying that kind of one size fits all best practice here. And in this case, it often results in people working in here believing that if there is failure, it is the result of insufficient resources applied. You don't have enough people, money, time, tools, whatever, to perform the analyze aspect of that sense, analyze, respond way of working. In fact, what you should be looking at is applying lean methodology in this space. The signals can be nuanced and varied, but they can be understood, and those cause effect relationships can be engineered into the process. So look at lean practices and look at how you can build somewhat complex but highly effective, highly efficient ways of working or solutions to work in this area. And then we move on to complex. So complex is where that cause and effect relationship is not obvious and cannot be ferreted out. It can only be seen in hindsight, and it's not predictable. This tends to result in emergent outcomes. So what does that mean? Cause and effect relationships aren't obvious. It, I like to think of this in the context of development, or real invention, like research and development type context, where I say, hey, I need to go and invent this new thing that has never existed in human history before. Um, the act of invention tends to fall into this category. It's very hard to plan. If I could plan my light bulb moment and put it on a Thursday, I absolutely would, but I just can't do that. So to work in this area, you really need to think about safety, and that, I mean, like workplace safety, not in terms, well, obviously always think of it in terms of physical safety and health, but think of it in terms of psychological safety. You're going to need to experiment. You're going to need safety nets for your people. You're going to need to constrain the blast radius because not every one of those experiments is going to be successful. But when you are successful, you need to amplify that success. When you do experience failure, you need to have the mechanisms in place to protect the team and the organization and the product and dampen that failure so you can pivot to a new path. In this case, you tend to want to avoid what's described as fail-safe design because that isn't really a thing. We know exactly how to navigate this complex domain by applying some fail-safe practice or process or whatever. That tends to not work. What you need is flexibility, and you need to have that safe environment for people to work, explore, discover, and respond to those discoveries. So agile is really a great way to work in this space. And then we have the chaotic space. So what is chaotic? It's where there is absolutely no cause and effective relationship. You cannot discover it. It simply doesn't exist. And so what's the challenge there? You can't apply best practice, you can't apply good practice, you almost can't attack it with systematic, scientific experimentation based learning and response. um, at some point you just have to choose to do something and see if it has the desired outcome. It's almost guesswork. And so, why would you do this? Well, you may choose to go into this domain specifically to help drive innovation. You may find yourself accidentally or forced into this area due to outside constraints. And when you do that, the appropriate response is to recognize it, number one, but then take bold, swift action and work to get out of the chaotic domain. You should be focused on getting into one of the other areas as quickly as possible. If you're here, you do have to be concerned with fear and desperation. This is a place where burnout can run rampant, where people think they're going to get fired every day, where hopelessness can arise. Nobody can see, you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So how does a team work in that environment? It can be very challenging. It can also lead to authoritarianism, and so somebody's got to do something. So a person with a particular personality characteristic may stand up and choose to take that bold action. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes people turn that to keep the chaos in place because they can reinforce their authoritarian position while in the chaotic domain. That tends to not be good for teams or organizations. So be aware of that and recognize it and do everything in your power to get to one of the other domains as quickly as possible. And then you have in the middle this idea of disorder. Disorder is simply not knowing where you are. It's a lack of self-awareness, and and this is not acceptable, right? You almost have to be able to step back once you understand the model and the ways that you can work and characterize your situations. Work to get that characterization done because it gives you the strategies that you need to actually become more effective and structure your work according to the situation that you're in. And so as I was going through my research, I kind of had a few light bulb moments I thought I would share with you, and hopefully you can understand it. Hopefully I did a good enough job explaining it to you and why it's interesting. But it kind of made me believe that, number one, we must purposely think and act differently depending on what zone we're in. And so what do I mean by that? Um, we often, number one, don't recognize the characteristics and situations that we're working within, and often apply the wrong strategies to if you apply the strategies of simple, clear work into a complex domain, you're not going to be efficient. You're not going to be successful. You're going to create frustration in your people and your teams, and it's not really good for anybody. You can spend too much time in a given zone, and if you do that, you can start believing that all the other zones should apply the same strategy that you've lived in for so long. That's just not true. You should understand that others other areas of work are different contexts and have different situations and require different strategies to be effective. So you have to always be reassessing the context and the situation and applying the right strategy of work. Um, a little related to that, number one size, do not apply a one size fits all. And unfortunately, this is, if you've been through, the program management training courses, um, you probably can recognize that there is a right way to do all this stuff. It's not true. There are multiple right ways depending on the situation, and how you choose and apply that is going to be critical to your success. How you One challenge is, okay, great, but now how do I apply, the required program management aspects and theory and training into a context that wasn't worked for? That is well beyond the scope of the meetup today, but we can try to talk through that later if you would like. And then in reality, I think we spend most of our time in disorder in our industry. I don't think we recognize the zones that we are actually working in, or too often we believe we're in one zone when in reality we're in another. And so I think that creates, again, it creates certain challenges with the teams. It creates frustrations, and it can lead to behavior that is driven by personal preference rather than the actual situation that you're in. And then the last thing that really hit me hard was recognizing that even within the context of a single value stream, there are different types of work that can traverse different zones. And so, an example of that, imagine you're working with an agile team to deliver a product. Well, the actual creation process of that, working in that agile team, is probably in the complex area, right? You're going to want to apply principles of agile because it's a discovery process. Cause and effect are not obvious or predictable. But when you get into your delivery process, well, that needs to be predictable. Cause and effect should have clear, although sometimes complex and nuanced relationships. And so that's a great place to apply lean principles, and how you marry these up and recognize that those two aspects of your value stream require different ways of thinking and different strategies to be efficient and effective. I think it was a real big that was my big light bulb moment. And then kind of the last thought on there, unfortunately, I just feel like disorder is close to home. I feel like we live in that in our industry. I feel like we live in disorder way too much. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think politics leads to disorder. I think personalities lead to disorder. Lack of understanding of systems of work, thinking that one size fits all can actually lead you in that space to that space as well. But those were kind of some of my thoughts on it. We'll get into the lean coffee, and I would love to hear your impressions and your thoughts as well. And so with that, I want to dive right in and let you guys participate. I will keep recording for the Lean Coffee, but I'm going to make a break here so that we'll vote at the end as to whether we want to keep the Lean Coffee in the presentation that goes to YouTube or not. I will either keep it in or cut it out. It's 100% up to the community. But here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to go and I'm going to open up this website, agile.coffee, and I'm going to create a new board. And I'm going to share the link to that board to everyone who's dialed into the Zoom, and you'll be able to pull that up in your browser. I'll stop sharing my desktop as we do this. And within that environment, we'll do a short introduction, and everybody's going to have a chance to create a card. You can create as many cards as you want, and you can put questions or topics for discussion on that card. And then we will allow people to vote. Everybody's going to get 5 votes, and just put as many votes on as many cards as you want. You can put 5 votes on one card. You can put 1 vote across 5 cards. It's 100% up to you. But this is how we're going to prioritize. And then we're going to set a timer, and we're going to talk about the highest ranking card for 5 minutes. After that 5 minutes is up, we'll just use our webcams for our chat to vote thumbs up or down. And we can continue talking about that, or we can move on to the next topic. My goal will be to get through maybe 3 to 5 cards in this session if we're engaged and energetic going through it. But I hope that this works. This is an experiment, but I do hope that it works. And if it does, we'll continue it going forward. So with that, we'll wrap the presentation part of the meetup, and let me start up the Lean Coffee.